Episode 6, Lost and Found, Out of Style. 3 renowned scientists, Papaia, Banani, Ravioli, and their assistant Igor, work at the Nasal Observatory. Papaia remembers that their flight for the conference is in 2 hours. With their suitcases, too many open and broken, they create chaos wherever they go. They were about to leave in a taxi, but Ravioli forgot his passport in the office. We're in the taxi in front of the observatory, where the other 3 are waiting for Ravioli. Finally, Ravioli shows up, sweating and looking worried, in front of the window. Ravioli, I turned the whole observatory upside down. I can't find the passport. Banani, I think you put it inside one of your suitcases. We're on the sidewalk in front of the observatory. Ravioli and Banani, working together perfectly, pull all the suitcases out of the taxi and start searching frantically, spilling the contents all over the sidewalk. The taxi driver takes advantage of the moment of distraction and speeds off. Let's cut it. But Banani's suspenders got caught in the trunk door. Banani starts running, dragged by the taxi, screaming for help. Finally, Banani's suspenders break, leaving him on the ground 100 meters away. Igor comments, maybe no one's told Banani yet that suspenders, while an elegant accessory, have been out of fashion for about a century. Anyway, if he survives this session of water skiing without skis and without water, he'll need to explain a couple of things. First, how did he manage to close his suspenders in the trunk? I mean, the exact movement. Second, for some obscure reason after unloading the luggage, he also did the taxi driver the favor of closing the trunk. Maybe he could have tapped on the glass to let him know he could leave. And last but not least, what will he use instead of suspenders to keep his pants up? 8. The second fact. 3 renowned scientists, Papaia, Banani, Ravioli, and their assistant Igor work at the Nasal Observatory. Papaia remembers that their flight for the conference is in 2 hours. With their suitcases, too many open and broken, they create chaos wherever they go. The taxi has escaped, dragging Banani for about 10 meters, who got stuck in it by his suspenders. We are in front of the observatory, where the 4 are pondering what to do next. Exhausted, the distinguished doctors sit on the building's stairs. Papaia checks the phone app. Time passes, and it seems that Papaia can't find anything interesting. While waiting, Banani and Ravioli continue their discussion about the book. Banani, we talked about the first fact. I'm curious to know what the second fact is. Ravioli, the second fact is that the disciples were convinced they had met the resurrected Jesus after his death. Banani, is it possible they were lying? Ravioli, and what would they gain from it? Stones thrown at them. Banani, ah yes, you said the Orthodox Jews began to persecute them. Ravioli, exactly, back then saying that Jesus was the Son of God was like asking to be stoned to death. Banani, why? Ravioli, it was part of their law. Banani, a very strict law. Ravioli, yes, and very old, dating back to the time of Moses in the Old Testament. Banani, but why would saying Jesus was the Son of God have been against their law? Ravioli, because the Jews didn't believe Jesus was the Son of God, let alone the Messiah prophesied in the Old Testament. Therefore, saying that Jesus, who they believed was an ordinary man, was the Son of God, especially after he had been crucified as a criminal, was blasphemy. Banani, yes, but couldn't they just give a fine to anyone who said that? Ravioli, of course not. The Mosaic law, followed by the Jews of that time, prescribed death for such an offense. Igor, fine? Yes, good idea. They should fine me for agreeing to follow you in this madness. At least I'd have some tangible proof of my mistake. Who was the Messiah? 3 renowned scientists, Papaia, Banani, Ravioli, and their assistant Igor work at the Nasal Observatory. Ravioli accidentally bought a book, which turns out to be very interesting. They are discussing Ravioli's book. Banani. Okay, I think we've put a lot of meat on the fire. For example, I've always heard about this Messiah, but I've never really understood who he is. Ravioli. According to the Jews of the first century, the Messiah was a special man sent by God who would free Israel from its enemies. Banani. And why didn't they believe that Jesus could be the Messiah? Ravioli. Because Jesus was humble, while the Jews expected the Messiah to be a powerful king who would free them from the domination of the Roman Empire. Banani. I see. So Jesus was a spiritual Messiah, not a military one? Ravioli. Exactly. According to Christians, Jesus freed them, but not from a dominating army, rather from the sin that every human being is inevitably enslaved to. Tui. Banani. But this didn't sound good to the ears of the Jewish religious leaders who ended up persecuting Christians. Ravioli. That's why the disciples had nothing to gain from preaching the resurrection of Jesus. First, because they themselves were initially Orthodox Jews, so this went against all their principles. Second, because becoming Christian at that time was very dangerous. Banani. In any case, you said that, like the other four, this second fact is supported by abundant evidence. So we can say that even most critics are certain that the disciples believed they had encountered Jesus risen from the dead. Ravioli. Yes, there's a lot of evidence the author shows us. And most critics think this is true, and that the disciples weren't lying. Igor. Banani was dragged for half the neighborhood by a taxi caught by his suspenders. But now, as if nothing happened, he's talking with Ravioli about the book. Apparently, for Banani, these are things that happen every day. Like a morning routine. So getting out of bed, brushing your teeth, and being dragged by a taxi along the asphalt. Body surfing style, but without the surfboard. In any case, apparently his brain hit the reset button. What a fool. 3 renowned scientists, Papaia, Banani, Ravioli, and their assistant Igor work at the Nasal Observatory. Papaia remembers that their flight to the conference is in 2 hours. With their many open and broken suitcases, they cause chaos wherever they go. The scientists missed the taxi, which sped off with their prepayment and a generous tip. We are in front of the observatory, where Ravioli is back searching for his passport in the numerous suitcases. Ravioli. This was the last suitcase, and it's not here either. Banani. Now what? How are we going to do this? Igor. Shall we call a taxi to leave us here? Ravioli, exulting. Hey, I found the passport. Papaia. Thank goodness. Where was it? Ravioli. I had it in my pocket. What a fool I am. Banani. You're not a fool, you're a real idiot. You made us miss the taxi. Papaia, calm down. Arguing isn't going to help us. We need to find another solution. Igor. In any case, we can say that sometimes the truth is like Ravioli's passport. We don't see it even when it's right under our nose.